The room was smaller than it should have been for that many people. John sat on the arm of a leather sofa, acoustic guitar resting against his knee, fingers still touching the strings. He had just finished playing. The last chord hung in the air for a moment before it dissolved into the noise of conversation starting up again. Glasses clinking, someone lighting a cigarette near the window. Mick was standing by the bookshelf, drink in hand, and he was laughing. Not politely. Not the kind of laugh you give a friend when something's charming or surprising. This was the other kind. The kind that cuts through a room. The kind that makes heads turn. John didn't move. His hand stayed on the guitar. His face didn't change. But everyone who knew him could see the stillness that came over him. The way his jaw set just slightly. The way his eyes stayed fixed on the floor in front of him instead of looking up. It was 1973. Late autumn in London, the kind of night where musicians and actors and people who mattered in certain circles gathered in someone's flat in Chelsea or Knightsbridge to drink expensive wine and pretend the world outside didn't exist. John had been invited because he was John Lennon. Mick had been invited because he was Mick Jagger. And for years, that had been enough. Two men at the top of their worlds, mutual respect, occasional collaboration. The kind of friendship that didn't require much but felt solid when it was there. John had been working on something new. A quieter song. More personal. The kind of thing that didn't have the edge or the fire of his earlier work, but had something else. Vulnerability. Maybe. Honesty. He'd been playing it for people he trusted. Testing it, seeing if it landed. Most had nodded. Some had said they liked it. No one had laughed. Until now. Mick's laugh wasn't mean-spirited. Not exactly. It was reflexive. The kind of reaction that escapes before you can catch it. But it was loud. And it was public. And in a room full of people who understood what it meant to put your work in front of others, it landed like a slap. Someone near the window coughed. Another person looked down at their drink. The woman sitting next to John touched his arm lightly. A silent gesture of solidarity. But he didn't acknowledge it. Mick realized what he'd done about 3 seconds too late. His smile faded. He looked at John, then away, then back again. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but didn't. The moment stretched. The room had gone quieter than it should have been. John set the guitar down carefully, leaning it against the sofa. He stood up. He didn't look at Mick. He walked to the bar cart near the corner, poured himself a drink, and stood there with his back to the room. For anyone else, that might have been the end of it. A laugh. A moment of awkwardness. Something to smooth over later with an apology or a joke. But this wasn't anyone else. This was two men who had spent a decade building empires out of sound and image. Two men who had learned to protect themselves by never showing weakness. Two men who understood that respect was currency, and once you lost it, you didn't get it back. Mick had grown up working class in Dartford, the son of a teacher. A boy who learned early that if you wanted something, you took it. He built the Rolling Stones with sweat and arrogance and a refusal to be ignored. He became famous for being untouchable. For the strut, for the lips, for the way he commanded a stage like it owed him something. But underneath all of it was the same fear every artist carries. The fear that it's not enough. That someone will see through it. That the next thing won't work. When he heard John's song, something in him reacted. Maybe it was the vulnerability in it. Maybe it was the softness. Maybe it reminded him of something he didn't want to feel. Maybe it just didn't sound like what he thought John should be making. Whatever it was, the laugh came out. Instinct. Defense. A way to put distance between himself and something that made him uncomfortable. But he saw the look on John's face. Or rather the absence of a look. The blankness. And he knew. John stayed by the bar for a long time. People tried to talk to him, but he gave short answers. Polite but distant. Mick stayed on the other side of the room. The party continued around them, but there was a weight in the air now. Something unspoken and unresolved. Around midnight, Mick walked over. He stood next to John, not looking at him directly. Both of them facing the room. Didn't mean anything by it, Mick said quietly. John took a sip of his drink. Didn't respond. It's just different, yeah? From what you usually do. Still nothing. Mick shifted his weight, uncomfortable now in a way he rarely was. Come on, John. It wasn't. You laughed, John said. His voice was calm. Flat. In front of everyone. I didn't think. No, John said. You didn't. Mick looked at him now, waiting for more. But John just stared straight ahead. The silence between them felt like a wall going up, brick by brick. It's just a song, Mick said, and the moment he said it, he knew it was the wrong thing. John turned to face him. His expression hadn't changed, but there was something behind his eyes now. Something cold. You want to know what's funny? John said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. A few people nearby stopped talking. I've been listening to your last album, and I didn't laugh. Even though I could have. Mick's jaw tightened. I didn't laugh, John continued, because I know what it takes to put something out there. I know what it costs, and I know that even when it's not perfect, even when it's not your best, it's still yours. And that means something. Mick's face had gone still now. The easy confidence, the swagger, all of it was gone. He looked like someone who'd been hit and wasn't sure how to hit back. But you? John's voice was quieter now, almost gentle, which made it worse. You laughed at something I made, in front of people, and you think that's nothing. I said I didn't mean. I don't care what you meant, John said. I care what you did. The room had gone almost silent. People were pretending not to listen, but everyone was listening. Mick could have walked away. He could have apologized. Really apologized. Could have found the words to make it smaller, to diffuse it. But pride is a strange thing. It makes you defend yourself even when you're wrong. It makes you double down when you should back off. Jesus, John, you're acting like I killed someone. It was a laugh. People laugh. Not at that, John said. Not like that. Maybe if you didn't take yourself so seriously. Maybe if you took anything seriously, John cut him off, you'd understand why this matters. Mick's face flushed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means you spent so long being Mick Jagger that you forgot how to be a person. You forgot what it feels like to be vulnerable. To show someone something real and have them reject it. Oh, and you're the expert on being real? Mick's voice was rising now. You, with your peace campaigns and your bed-ins and your constant need to be the most important person in the room? At least I'm trying to be something, John said. You're just trying to be famous. It was the kind of line you can't take back. The kind that's designed to hurt. And does. Mick stared at him. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. But then it hardened into something else. You know what? Mick said. His voice low and tight. I thought the song was boring. I thought it was soft. I thought it sounded like you'd given up. And yeah, I laughed. Because it was disappointing. From you. John didn't flinch. And now, you know what I think of you. Mick set his drink down on the nearest table, hard enough that it made a sound. He looked at John one more time, and there was something in his expression that was almost pleading. Almost asking for a way out of this. But John's face was stone. Forget it, Mick said. He turned and walked toward the door. Someone tried to stop him, asked him where he was going, but he brushed past them without answering. The door closed behind him. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer, and then slowly, carefully, conversation started again. People avoided looking at John. The woman who had been sitting next to him earlier came over, tried to say something comforting, but he shook his head. I'm fine, he said. But he wasn't, and everyone knew it. John left about 20 minutes later. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. He just picked up his guitar and walked out into the cold London night, alone. They didn't speak again for years. Not at parties, not at events, not even through mutual friends. The friendship, whatever it had been, was over. Not because of the laugh, really, but because of what came after. Because neither of them could find a way to step back from the edge they'd pushed each other toward. Mick told people, when asked, that they'd had a disagreement, that these things happen, that he and John were just different people with different approaches to music and life. He said it casually, like it didn't matter, like it was just one of those things. But people who knew him said he never played that song again, the one from the album John had mentioned. And when someone asked him about it once, years later, he changed the subject. John didn't talk about it much either. He made jokes sometimes, in interviews, about rock stars who took themselves too seriously, about people who cared more about image than substance. People assumed he was talking about Mick, but he never said the name. The song John had played that night was never officially released. He recorded a version of it later, but it was different, harder. The vulnerability was gone, replaced with something more guarded. Some people who heard both versions said the first one was better, that it had something the second one didn't, but John never played the original again. What stayed with people who were in that room wasn't the argument itself, but the look on both their faces. Mick, realizing too late that he'd crossed the line. John, realizing that someone he'd respected had failed him in a way that couldn't be undone. There's a kind of friendship that's built on mutual respect, on the unspoken understanding that you see each other, that you value what the other person does, that you protect each other's dignity even when you disagree. When that foundation cracks, everything else collapses. It doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is that something was broken, and neither person knew how to fix it. John could have let the laugh go. He could have assumed it was thoughtless rather than cruel. He could have talked to Mick privately, could have given him a chance to apologize without an audience. But he didn't. Because in that moment, his hurt was bigger than his generosity. His need to defend himself was stronger than his desire to preserve the relationship. And Mick could have owned it. Could have said, clearly and without defense, that he'd been wrong, that the laugh had been a mistake, that he was sorry. But he didn't. Because admitting fault felt like weakness. And weakness in the world they lived in was the one thing you couldn't afford. So instead, they both chose pride. They both chose to be right rather than to be connected. And they both lost something that night that they never got back. Years later, someone asked John if he regretted how things had ended with Mick. He was quiet for a long time before he answered. "I regret that it mattered so much," he said finally. "I regret that I couldn't just let it be what it was. A moment. A mistake. But I also regret that he couldn't see why it hurt. So I don't know. Maybe we both regret different things." The person asked if he'd ever consider reaching out, repairing it. John shook his head. Some things you can't fix by talking about them. Some things are just done. And maybe that was the truth of it. Not that either of them was wrong or right. Not that one of them should have apologized more or the other should have forgiven easier. But that some moments create distance that can't be crossed, no matter how much time passes. Some words, once spoken, change the shape of things permanently. The song still exists somewhere, in someone's archive. The first version, the vulnerable one, the one John played that night. Maybe someday it'll surface. Maybe people will hear it and understand what was lost when Mick laughed. Or maybe they won't. Maybe it'll just sound like another song, another piece of music from another time. But for the people who were in that room, who saw two men who had conquered the world fail to navigate a single moment of hurt and pride, it means something else. It's a reminder that fame doesn't protect you from being human. That success doesn't teach you how to be kind. That sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to step back from your own pain and see the person in front of you clearly. The friendship ended that night, not with violence or scandal or public drama, but with two men walking out of a room, separately, carrying something heavy that they'd never set down. And in the silence that followed, in the years of distance and unspoken regret, there was a kind of lesson. Not about winning or losing, not about who was right, but about the cost of protecting yourself at the expense of connection. About how easy it is to destroy something that took years to build. About how the need to be respected can make you do things that leave you alone. John kept writing songs. Mick kept performing. Their careers continued. Their legacies grew. Their names became permanent parts of music history. But that friendship, that specific bond between two artists who understood each other, who had navigated the same impossible pressures, and emerged as something close to equals, that was gone. And neither of them ever found another one quite like it.